Hello there, woman beings, and welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. I'm Emma. I'm here today with the wonderful Kelly.
Hello.
And the amazing Kellyanne.
Hello.
And a very special guest, which is the incredible Cynthia Vacca Davis. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Cynthia.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We are too. For anyone who doesn't know, Cynthia is an author. Her book came out, was it in this year?
It was in
or
August.
Last year?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Last year. It's called Intersexion. She has also worked in higher education and taught journalism and is a freelance journalist right now. And we are going to pick her brain about all of the things that she has investigated within her book, Intersexion. It tackles the topic of being an intersex person. It tackles, it tells the story of somebody within her life who's intersex alongside her story. And along with all of that, throw in some Christianity and we have her book. So we're very excited to talk to Cynthia about all of this today. You're going to enjoy this episode and we're going to enjoy this chat. So let's dive right in. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Cynthia, thank you again for being here. We're very excited. It's been a long time coming. You waited for us to leave the country and come back, and so patiently. We appreciate it.
And now, and you're fitting me in before I leave the country.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're just globe-trotting women.
We are living our best lives.
Yeah.
So just to familiarize our listeners with who you are, what it is that you do, could you tell us just a bit about your story and then also why it is that you wrote this book?
Yeah. So it's a really hard book to just kind of put into this elevator pitch. And you do a really good job with it. So I had for a long time considered myself to be an ally, but didn't really truly know what a true ally was. It was easy to say, oh, sure, I have queer friends and it's awesome. But I didn't really realize that true allyship has a cost associated with it until this was 2014. And I was working as an adjunct professor. And I was at 3 different universities. One of them I was taking classes at. I wasn't teaching there, but I was doing a circuit around 3 different universities and just trying to figure out if one of them would take me for a real job rather than just doing the circuit. I'm going. It was in 2 states, and I'm going through 2 bridge tunnels. And
oh my gosh!
I got papers in the back seat and snack wrappers, shotgun, and I'm just doing this thing. And one of the universities was a Christian. Here's the Christianity part. It's a Christian Bible college, and they approached me mid-semester, which was really a rare thing, it never happens. And they wanted to give me a promotion, which also doesn't usually happen. So this was a lot of exciting developments. And and especially because I was still taking classes. So I wasn't even finished with my MFA. I had a master's, but I hadn't finished with my MFA. So all of this was just very exciting, unusual, rare opportunity. But as I was going through that process of kind of transitioning into this role, I discovered that I was working for some pretty bigoted people. And an undue amount of the interview process was focused on my feelings about LGBTQI plus people, which personally, I think that's not not very important to whether or not I can teach English.
Sure.
So they had actually drafted a statement that they had, it was a brand new thing because gay marriage had just been legalized in Virginia, and the school was in North Carolina. And they could see it coming, it's going to be coming. So we have to alert our base of how we feel about this situation. So we're going to have everybody sign a statement just basically saying that we don't participate in any way, shape, or form with any support of the LGBTQIA plus community. And actually referred to the community as repugnant and offensive.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was required. And actually, I couldn't have even continued working as an adjunct.
Wow.
Without signing that, because that was a whole brand new policy, across the board. You had to be on board with that. So that's when I realized that I couldn't really go on calling myself an ally and sign something like this just to get a better job.
Sure.
That is, I think, the heart of what was happening in Intersexion, because meanwhile, back at the ranch, so to speak, I had befriended someone from church named Dani. And exactly at the time when this was happening at work, Dani called and wanted to talk about something. And at this point, I knew Dani as female. Everybody knew Dani as female. Yeah. But we also knew that something was not quite right. Something had been going on with Dani for a while. And I found out that what had been going on with Dani was that he was intersex. And it was something that he'd been living with his entire life. Meanwhile, and I always say he when I talk about Dani, but at this point, nobody was calling Dani he. Yeah. Dani had been living since puberty. Well, since birth, he knew that he was confused. Everyone's calling me a girl, but I'm a boy. And even as a toddler, when you're a toddler, you don't know a lot about gender. You don't know about how these things work. So he assumed that there was some confusion, and that when he grew up, as he grew, that people would just understand that he was a boy. So he kind of regarded it as this is annoying and upsetting, and I don't understand why people aren't getting this right. So he would pray, let everybody see who I am. And then puberty came, and he had double puberty.
Yeah.
And which doesn't always happen in intersex. There's a million different ways to be intersex. Only a slight exaggeration there. There's a lot of different ways to be intersex. And, but for Dani, it was the full experience. Dani had male and female puberty, but the male puberty kind of started first. So he regarded it as answer to prayer. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Confirmation.
Yeah. Confirmation. Finally, I am turning into a boy, and this is great. And soon everybody's going to see, and everything, it's going to be wonderful. But then the female puberty hit. He got a period and started to develop breasts, and oh boy. But he knew instinctively, because he grew up in a conservative Christian home. And he knew, we don't talk about things like this here. This isn't safe subject matter. So he stuffed it away. He didn't want to lose his family. He didn't want to lose his church. He didn't want to, heaven forbid, be sent to a doctor and be studied. And he just went kind of deep undercover and decided to give people what they wanted to see, which was female. But at the point when I had the conversation with Dani, it wasn't possible in any way, shape, or form, because this had been 30 years at this point that this secret had been, he'd been living with it. But one thing about intersex is there's a big medical component to it, and there's a lot of competing hormones. And he was physically becoming pretty sick, and mentally was unwell with living with this. Yeah. So it wasn't going to be possible anymore for him to continue to carry on just keeping a secret to himself and presenting the world, the woman that they expected to see. Yeah. so he said, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if my family's going to accept me. Don't know if I'm going to get kicked out of church. I don't know which one of my friends will stick around. And I was a new friend. So at this point, it was risky for him to tell me. But it was also, I think, there's all these people with all this history. And I think in some ways it was easier because I was this new friend.
Yeah.
But I also, he had known and heard from other people that I really enjoyed the company of being around a lot of gay friends. And so he felt that there was this safety and telling me this and then asking, like, will you support me? I don't know how this is going to end. And I need a team of people. Also, I needed to practice. He had a little script, how he was going to explain it to people. And so he was practicing that script. And then, I have this conversation, and then all this other stuff, these other events went down at work, and this is all happening at once. So I'm having to decide, who am I really? Am I somebody that's trying to get this job and trying to have this position? Am I somebody that's going to really truly support Dani, which I couldn't see in any way, shape, or form that I could do it and just go along with things at work like nothing was wrong?
Yeah.
So as far as the book part of it goes, very early on, because I was finishing up my MFA, I still had to, actually, I used the term finishing up. At this point, I hadn't even settled on what my thesis was going to be. So in talking with Dani and becoming so interested in what he was explaining to me about intersex, because I knew nothing about it. It was 2014 and not a lot of people were talking about it. And I still run into people today who don't know anything about intersex, but so much more so 9 years ago. And Dani, just through conversation, we just landed on it one night that, I'd be okay if you wrote about intersex. I didn't even ask him. It was just somebody made a comment about, like, this is unbelievable. You don't even see movies about, the things that he's going through, and it would be a great book. And then it just, from there, it was, everybody involved in this conversation knew I was trying to find my thesis material. And it just kind of was like, hey, you should write about intersex. And I felt excited and also scared and uncomfortable because I'm not intersex. And I didn't know how that was going to be received. But Dani is the one sitting on my couch going, yeah, write this story. I'll help you. And I'll answer whatever you want to know. So I have this very willing participant who has lived this amazing story. And he's saying, look, nobody's talking about this. We need to do something to get people talking about it because it's important. So it kind of went very quickly from, I'm just going to write about intersex and explore what this is, to, oh, wait, now I kind of have skin in the game here because I just got the boot out of my university for being an ally. So I think the convergence of all of those things is what ended up becoming the book Intersection.
I think it's incredible that you're raising awareness around these stories. I've started your book. I haven't had the chance to finish it yet, but I already love the way that you, I already love the way that you write, and the way that you write in Dani's voice, and the way that you're sharing his experiences feels very much like you're in it, and I think that's really valuable for people to gain empathy and understanding of what an intersex or anyone in the LGBTQIA spectrum's experience is. I think that's just invaluable. But there is also a tension there, right? Because you are like a straight, cis woman that is telling this person's story, and they're a friend and there's someone that you're getting consent from. But even for us, like, when we heard about your book, we're like, oh, like, is this something we want to talk about or no? Like, what does that look like? Like, where is this woman coming from? Like, how does that work? Like, in terms of, we wouldn't want to, misrepresent someone's story or anything like that. So I'm just curious to hear from you more about how you navigate that tension of telling someone's story and putting yourself sort of in their shoes as you write your book, and how you've you've walked that sort of tightrope.
It is a tightrope. You get it. It's a tightrope. And thank you for the lovely comments about my writing. And I'm glad that what you're getting from Dani is the empathy, because that was my goal. I felt like stories matter, and we can relate to something in a story much more so than just a news report, because, I do write journalism, but then there's this narrative, kind of a narrative true story.
Yeah.
Does more work, right? It does more of that heavy lifting because you're feeling it. But it wasn't just one thing or one moment where I felt comfortable and rectified, like, oh, this is why I feel okay doing it. It's like an everyday sort of process. Like, I'm carrying this story and I'm carrying it so carefully. Because it's fragile and it's beautiful and it's precious. So I have to carry it carefully. And it's always been important for me to know that Dani has been a full collaborator. So when we, and I often say we, because I look at it's his book too. He didn't really want to be, in fact, he definitely didn't want his name on the cover. He wanted to stay in the background. He wanted to be just somebody who is giving the story as a gift, because he's hopeful that other people in his situation will feel less alone, and B, that other people who read will develop empathy and things will be better for the community. And he said, I don't have the skills or desire to write this, but I want it out there. So I keep coming back to that. Okay, this is something Dani wants to happen. This is something that he wants to give to the community. This is something that he feels will be part of that conversation. So that's kind of my first thing. If Dani's comfortable with anything Dani's comfortable with, I'm going to go forward with. And part of that navigation was having him read everything before it, his eyes had to be on it first, really. And sometimes he wasn't in a mental space where he could read it, because he told me early on, you're writing this too well. This is putting me back. And I would say, are you okay? Do you want me to stop? No, it's just, I'm going to need some time to process, because like it puts me right back. Yeah. It puts me back in those spaces. But it was also good for him in a way, because he was bringing all of this out. And bringing it all, and let's look at it. Let's look at what's happened. Let's think about what's happened. Let's process what's happened. So there was an element of that too, I think. But I think the biggest challenge for me in carrying the story was, it was initially, from what you were saying, you're still in the Dani section. This book is in 3 sections. There's Dani, there's Cynthia, and then there's an intersection, which is where the 2 of our stories come together. So it's in 3 parts. And it wasn't always set up that way. It was initially, I would kind of flip back and forth from Dani to me, to Dani to me. And it was in third person. I thought that was the only way to write Dani, because again, I'm taking my journalistic background and I'm kind of writing Dani like I would in a narrative nonfiction sort of way, where I'm telling his story, but I'm removed from it, in this third person. And then I received word from my editor that wasn't the way to go. And Dani had to be in first person. And I've said this several times in interviews. It was, and I'm not kidding. It was just like, okay, the book is over. I can't do that. Like, I cannot do that, because that to me felt like, okay, it's one thing to tell his story. It's another thing to take on his voice.
Right. Yeah.
And I felt like that was going to be, and I would get questions one of the reasons why it took me a long time to get it published is agents and editors that I spoke with were really trying to navigate this space too.
Right.
And Dani wasn't right alongside of me saying, hey, this is the way, I want this to be. But what I found, well, first of all, Dani said, I told him what was going on. Next time he said, well, what's going on with the book? I said, oh, bad news. He said, what? I said, well, they want me to write you in first person. And he said, so? So? Write it in first person. I don't care. Do what the editors are telling you to do. I was like, really? And he said, yeah, do what the editors say. And after I made that switch, I found that I had fewer people questioning the book. And I'm not sure why. I'm truly not sure why. But I think in what my editor said that helped me to navigate that, and to understand what I was doing a little bit better, she said, think about it as ghostwriting. You're ghostwriting, Dani. And I think that people read it that way a little bit more. Like Prince Harry's memoir that just came out, they had a piece in the New Yorker, I think a week or so ago, about the ghostwriter behind that memoir. So I think we do as society kind of understand that idea of ghostwriting a little bit. And I think that made it more palatable for certain people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
At least, and I think editors question, I mean, it was an editor that told me to do it. So I think they questioned it less.
And to some extent, it makes sense to me, the idea of Dani wanting his story out there, but not wanting to put himself as the face of it, like the value of the anonymity. And I know that you changed Dani's name in the story as well. So like that's not even the name of the person that we're talking about. And so Dani's able to, protect themselves from further harm and from being sort of put out into this public sphere and re-traumatized even more. Right. But still able to share what they're seeing and is a valuable story and is something that more people should learn more about. I feel like, at least from what I see, I hear so much about all the other letters in LGBTQIA, but I don't hear a lot about intersex. And that's something that has come up a little bit more in the last few years, but it's like, sometimes I'm like, I don't even fully know what intersex is, or I need to remind myself. I need to Google about this. I need to remember what all the different things are. It makes sense that Dani would want to propel it, but it also makes sense that Dani would want to protect themselves and to be safeguarded in that anonymity. And the idea of ghostwriting, that does really help put it into perspective for me, even locking that into my brain, oh yes, this, that does make a lot of sense. And in like I said, you do really, it feels like portray Dani in a very personal way, and it feels like it's coming from him. And I think that's a testament, one, to your relationship with Dani and how well you know him, and then also to that this actually is his story. It's just coming out through you as a vessel.
Yeah, and that's one thing that was important to me, because I really argued with my editor. I'm not even going to lie. No, I don't think that's what we want to do. Yeah, it is what we do. And then the ghostwriting helped, and then I said, it's just going to sound like it's me throughout the entire book. It's, because I am telling my story in first person, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to differentiate the voices, and it was just the whole thing was going to read like it was me. But I have had many people say, oh no, we don't get that at all. So I think that helped. And I think another thing that helped was, I really went back and just rewrote it. It wasn't just a matter of going through and changing the third person he to I. I had to actually rewrite scenes, and I had to get in his head a little bit more. And I had to think about words that he would use in real life more than, so I'm kind of swapping out vocabulary. I'm thinking, oh, what would Dani say at this moment rather than, just making up something, that comes from my head. So it was a huge challenge.
That's so cool though. 'Cause it goes from I'm telling a story to this is the story, you know, and I can't imagine as an aspiring writer, the idea of going through the editing process and changing something from third person to first person, that's gutting. Like, I get it. I would quit.
So much work that you're then having to totally alter.
But like that just shows like the value and the respect that you have for Dani's story. You're willing to get in the trenches and redo the work because you see the value there, and that's really beautiful.
It had to be right, and I knew that something wasn't right. I just couldn't put my finger on it, and that's why I started working with the editor, because this was even before I had a contract to have it published. This was just me on my own saying, I need to get a good editor to help me, because something is not hitting all the cylinders, and I don't know what it is. I'm too entrenched in this. I can't see it with fresh eyes anymore.
Oh, that's the hard part about writing. Yeah. No, it's perfect and amazing. Don't touch it.
Yeah. No, I know you pour yourself into it, and then you just want people to go, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Affirm me.
You're like, this is
Tell
great.
me I'm a genius. 100%. So Cynthia, you obviously see the value and the beauty of Dani's story. You see how important it is, how much people need to be talking about it. However, there may be some people that won't feel this way.
Yep.
So for me, I've been processing some of this because I actually went home very recently to Oklahoma. And I'm from a Methodist church, and there's a big split, big drama. People are big mad happening right now over LGBTQ plus issues, right?
Yep.
Well, issues like it's a Roe v. Wade situation, right? We're like, let the churches decide. And they're like, no, don't do that. Right?
Yes.
So I'm processing all this. Obviously, I get a lot of information through the grapevine, but that makes me really interested to know, like, how did your church respond that you met Dani through? Like, as he initially started the transition and then further along as that journey progressed, because I'm like, I want to know the church drama. Tell me everything.
Oh, there's so much church drama. I am somewhat familiar with what's going on in the Methodist church because, spoiler alert, we don't go to the church that we all met at.
What?
Yeah. I know. Shocking. But Dani and Krista, his wife, started going to a church, a Methodist church, and they were thriving because it was an affirming church.
Yeah.
And then this all hit the fan, and the affirming pastor left, and then there was just so many question marks, and I think that was just discouraging to them. So yeah, it's an unfortunate thing that's happening, but the church drama where we were, first of all, the inlet is I speak in past tense because I'm not there, but it's still a congregation. The strangest, in a good way, church I ever went to. It was just not like normal church. From the moment we walked in, we knew it was different. And at first, this was all very positive. For one thing, the people, the congregation is made up from such a diverse range of people. We had doctors, we had people who were experiencing homelessness, we had people who were drug users, and we had people who were, professional business people. So it's a mix of everything. And the church also wasn't associated with a denomination, which is good and interesting sometimes, but also the wheels can just come off, and there's no
checks and balances.
Right. So this place is just flying by the seat of the minister's pants, basically. Like whatever, he's in charge, and he's trying to be everything to everyone, which can, again, have a good side. But this is where the drama started, because when Dani first, this was within a couple of weeks after we had the initial conversation, and it was decided that since this was happening, there was really no choice, that Dani was doing this in stages. So told some close people around him, he told his family, and then was going to tell the inner circle of church people that we associated with. And Dani at this point was the youth minister. Mm-hmm. So there were ramifications. One of the things he was afraid of was, I'm not going to be able to work with the youth anymore. And this was a huge part of his life. So there was a meeting, and I was in on all of the meetings from pretty much the ground floor. And the first meeting went really surprisingly well. Everyone was very supportive. But there was also kind of a disturbing, what I was able to identify later as this disturbing element, because the disturbing element is that intersex has medical, verifiable medical component to it. Mm-hmm. And people are more willing to engage with the topic of intersex for that reason, which can be a conversation opener, and it can be a way to, like somebody that is completely against anything with the LGBTQI community, they will engage in the conversation because of the medical component. But also, it's a little problematic because we have to be able to have this reason. We have to be able to see that it's medical and not, because they're trying to separate it from all the rest is what they're trying to do. They're trying to take the intersex, and put it in a medical category, and then still feel good throwing all the rest of the letters away is kind of how I look at it. Because it was billed as there's a person in our congregation with a medical problem, people were like, oh, okay, tell us more. And because we had some NASA scientists and we had some doctors, in the congregation, they were pretty well educated, and it wasn't a hard jump for them to go, oh, I understand what's happening here. And that's okay. We're going to support you. There were a lot of little, unfortunate things that were kind of working against everyone being fully accepting. And that's that the church not having a denominational kind of umbrella, there were conservative people in the church as well. Most of the people that were kind of in leadership and were making a lot of the decisions were really pretty progressive. But there was a small minority of conservative people, and they were a little hesitant. And there were also some people who used to be in Dani's youth group at a different church who were now adults. These are like some people in their 30s who had Dani as a female youth leader in their growing up years. And it was especially hard news for them. Which I think complicated things. I think it kind of stacked the deck against Dani a little bit, because these people weren't just processing it from I understand what's going on, medically or otherwise. It was, wait a minute, all those years you were my youth leader and you were somebody that I didn't, you're not the person I thought you were. That was one thing that caused the tide to start turning a little bit. And then also when Dani got out of the relationship he was in, which wasn't a healthy relationship, but it was something that appeared healthy on the outside.
They always do.
So part of that process of telling his truth was, I'm also in this relationship that's not at all okay or healthy. And that person was in the church, and she would do things like cry during the entire service. And that the optics on that were kind of like, oh, Dani's leaving. Dani's leaving his partner, and now she's crying. This isn't cool. I guess he's become a jerk now. And so there was a lot of those kind of things going on. And there were meetings. There were copious meetings. And then when Dani started dating, then the grilling started with Krista. and what were his intentions with her? And she was younger, and so it just was layer after layer after layer after layer that it just wasn't sustainable.
Well, that's just a lot too to have. I mean, to be going through something like that, which is very visible in terms of like transitioning your gender. And then, you know, having the people in your life that you trust come around you to be there, but then also navigating being in a church community where values are built on things like support and care and understanding and tolerance, or, you know, whatever that may be. But in reality, you are not personally affiliated with every single person in the congregation, but it becomes a congregational issue.
Right. Exactly.
And so it turns into a very codependent corporate shift of all sorts of different people who are not necessarily bound by anything other than their decision to attend the same location to practice their faith.
Right.
Which is, you know, lots of beauty there in so many ways, but also very complicated when trying to navigate a very personal and drastic life change.
Yeah. And you're navigating this personal life change, but you're also under this microscope the entire time.
Yeah.
That was really difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how exhausting as well.
Yeah.
Like, I could not imagine going through anything close to that challenging.
Yeah, because like suddenly you owe everyone and anyone an explanation of the very intimate details of your life.
Yeah.
Right. And he was such a good sport about it. Like, I want to educate you, ask me anything, and I'm an open book. And then, you know, it to be that open and to be that welcoming, like from he's welcoming the congregation into this thing he's going through. And then some of them are like, no thanks. Or use it as an opportunity to grill him about anything that they felt was appropriate. And most of it, frankly, wasn't appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fairly, I think that's like links to just like the obsession with, you know, like what your sex life is or what your purity status is and all of that within Christian, like evangelical church settings, where there is this idea that, oh, your sexuality, your relationships, all of those things are not your own. They are any person within the faith could ask you anything about, you know, about your sex life, about your love life, about your preferences. And that's okay because they're just holding you accountable, or they're just making sure that you're aligned with God or whatever it is. And it's this very strange, honestly, a very strange obsession because the Bible itself doesn't focus on sex as much as I think a lot of the evangelical church does. And so like that wasn't like a major concern of Jesus's.
Yeah, I mean, I just like, you're describing this and I'm just like trying, like the boundary nightmare of trying to be open in public and like, you know, get the support of your church, but also.
Yeah, because you also want to feel, I imagine in a circumstance like Dani's, you want to feel accepted and you want to feel like seen by the people that are in your community. But it's also not necessarily an invitation to pry into all of your life. And it sounds like you said, Dani was a pretty good sport about it, but like, he didn't have to be. There's no obligation.
And then poor Krista got drug into it. And, and when you were talking about their purity and everything, they're asking like details, like, are you having sex? And like, oh my goodness. And then it just, it kind of felt, you know, there's this gross misconception that anybody that is in the LGBTQI plus community is somehow a predator. And, and you know, and they're asking Krista, just because she's younger, like, you know, are you safe? And are you, you know, kind of things like that. Like, are you having sex? And none of that is appropriate. None of that.
It's like, I can't tell you how much that's not your business. Like, it's actually stunning how much it's not your business.
So stunning.
I'm like, I went to ministry school when I was very young, so I'm like having flashbacks of like all the questions that they used to ask us. Be like, but tell us, are you making out? And if so, in what way? I'm like, why? Like, are you going to go like think about that later? Like, could you stop being weird?
Have you been horizontal together?
Yes.
Horizontal was a common phrase. Avoid the horizontal position.
Yeah.
We
Leave
told.
room for Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he wants to be there too. Like, stop.
Well, I'm actually curious because in the midst of all this, you and Dani are developing this friendship. I mean, you kind of started out with a friendship and it's growing in the midst of all that's happening.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So how did the process of writing the book together and the process of his transition impact your relationship?
I really got to know him very well, very quickly, because once there was this, idea that we were going forward with the book, we would sit and have book talks, which was like reverse book club. We're writing a book, not reading it, but we would have these book talks, and he would come over, we'd kick back some drinks and, just tackle a topic or a period of time and just talk for a couple hours. And then, either the next week or the next month, we would do it again. And so I got to know him very, very well, but also, and I got to know things that had happened before, kind of get caught up on all the things that I wasn't there for. But then everything else was happening concurrent to this. So
that's a lot.
It was a lot. It was a whole lot. Being present for those meetings and trying to be support to help him navigate all of these relationships that were in various states of reorganization or dissolution or whatever was happening. So there was a lot happening all the time. And you do tend to get very close when you're going through these intense things together. And then when you started dating Krista, now I have another new friend because, she immediately became part of our lives and our community. And Dani lived with us for a while, which was, now he's our roommate. So
that's a whole different level of close.
Oh yeah. And when he was really, truly in earnest going through transition, like had hormones and all of those things, he was living in my house. So, you do get pretty close in those circumstances. And he's been developing this friendship with my husband as well. And so it was very much a family sort of thing. But it was an honor really to go through this with him. Not saying that every day was easy, but because there was a lot happening all the time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have changed a thing.
I feel like people tend to be like very vocal and like prideful about the fact that they are allies. But very few people are really in the trenches like you were with Dani. And the fact that you're like, yes, come be in my home. Like, I am here for you. I will write your story. Like, that's all really, really beautiful. And yeah, I just was like, wow, I just need to host space for that for just a second.
Well, I think even friendship, I mean, nobody likes being messy around anyone else, right? Like, we like to handle our mess on our own and then be with people at our best. But sometimes I think I could say that, in our friendship or in my marriage, or sometimes the messy things are the things that draw you closer together in beautiful ways. And so
definitely
there's just something about like human relationships that when mess combines with trust and good relationship can be just so profound and beautiful.
Definitely. And that gets touched on actually at the very end of the book. So a little bit of a spoiler alert. But my husband gives the toast at the wedding because Dani and Krista get married. And he starts talking about that very concept. Like it's the things that go wrong that make memories. Like when you're on a vacation, you don't always just remember, you do, the views were great or this went really well. But what you end up talking about is, we had a blown tire and, and we had to walk and we were hungry. And then somebody came and gave us food, like the weird, unexpected, the unscripted parts are where the memories are made.
That's very true. And I think it's admirable to see the way that like you've stepped up to be that ally for Dani, and then to also be willing to sacrifice for that allyship. Like I think about what does it really look like to like stand behind your beliefs and to stand behind what it is that you say that you believe. Like I sometimes get nervous to repost something on my Instagram story that I know is going to be controversial to the beliefs that maybe people have known me to have in the past, or that people who I'm still close to or still love would disagree with, So I think that, but then I like the reminder of, why feel afraid to stand up for something that you actually think is right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the space I lived in all the time of, I have to be really careful about what I post or what I say because I wanted people to like me.
Yeah.
And I knew that being honest about certain beliefs or being honest about disagreements, with mainstream Christianity, was going to be unpopular and you will lose friends. So it was up until 2014. That was kind of how I operated. Like, I really want to be a good person and I want to be there for, gay friends and all that. But I also want everybody over here to like me. So I'm walking this sort of tightrope, and I don't want to be not liked, heaven forbid. And I certainly don't want to be the center of controversy because people will think this or that about me. So what this was for me was a true moment of who am I? Who am I really? Because I don't think I want to be that person anymore. And it's scary because, there's going to be backlash and you are going to lose some friends and you are going to lose some things. But Dani was going through this whole thing so his insides and his outsides matched and he could be this whole person. And that's what I wanted too. And I realized if I, say, went to work every day and I worked for this university where the president was posting pro-Trump things and anti-LGBTQIA plus things. And, this is the face of the university. And now I would be associated with that. Yeah. It just felt very mismatched to me. And it was so, so, so scary, though, to go to say, hey, world, this is the way it is from now on, and see who sticks around.
Yeah. And I feel like, it might sound harsh. Why do we want so badly to keep these relationships if they're conditional on that?
Oh, yeah. And absolutely.
I know there's so much complication and nuance in that. Some of those people might be family members or people that have been in your life for so long. But like, if that's the tipping point, then there's something else that's maybe deeper there.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard to recognize. It's a hard line to walk, and it can be really difficult when you feel like your values have changed or your values are finally coming to the surface and they don't line up to maybe what people have expected of you before or what people think that they knew of you.
Yeah. People will be disappointed in you,
Oh, yeah. It's also so tragic to me that thought leaders in evangelical Western Christianity have such a chokehold on what beliefs are good and what beliefs are immoral.
Yeah.
That other Christian thought leaders can step up and bring alternative like ideas and viewpoints to the conversation. And instead of mixing with other thought leaders, they are marginalized and pushed to the edges. It's so tragic to me that someone like you, who's working as an adjunct professor in a university, who has a personal, very deep relationship with someone who's going through this very present issue in our country and has done countless hours of research and writing and work on this subject, is not considered more of an expert in the topic than the current existing powers that be.
Yeah.
And I find it so frustrating that as we see the Western evangelical church maintain and become even more rigid in their acceptance of different ways of thought surrounding certain political issues, social issues, humanitarian issues, the more and more like Christianity as a whole like disintegrates on the edges.
Yeah.
When really faith is so much more fluid than like what certain pastors have decided
exactly
it is.
The pastor was always the ultimate authority, right? You know,
Yes.
well, if the pastor says it's okay, it's okay. Or if the pastor says that we shouldn't be doing this, we can't be doing this. It's like he's a demigod or something.
Yeah. And it's like, it's crazy. Like, why is that? Like, why can other people who have spent deep amounts of research and personal, like, loss in these subjects be the ones who are heard?
Right. It's like the ever-present issue with pastors in general, that they're pastors, so they have the authority to give you sex advice, to give you financial advice, to counsel you, even though they themselves have no credentials in counseling and have probably never been to counseling.
Or maybe not even married.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's like all the things compound into like you said, a demigod. And it's like, you're in charge. Whatever you say goes.
Yeah.
Like,
it's kind of an odd system.
It's
a very odd system. And like, I have hope for a new Christianity that is more, I guess, decentralized, that has all sorts of different faith leaders that you can learn from and grow in and, you know, evolve as you practice your own faith. But it feels like they continually again and again are silenced by the mainstream media, like Christian media, mainstream Christian leaders, mainstream Christian churches. There's just not a platform for them.
Yeah.
But we're seeing so many things disintegrate. Do you think that maybe like the so-called ex-evangelical movement, do you think that maybe we are just rebuilding something that is going to be refreshing? I don't know. I want to believe.
That's a great, I would love to believe that too. I think I just find so many more of the ex-evangelicals that I encounter are like me, where they're like, I don't know what I believe. Whatever I believe, it's not that.
Yeah.
Right.
Who are off to the side. They don't want to step in church because they're traumatized from their time there. They're nervous to like engage in the faith practice because it's been harmful to them in the past. And I don't know, you'd have to rally somehow a bunch of people who are very adamantly trying to not be rallied.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty hopeful in that realm. I think that we see people like Tim Whitaker, who we just recently had on the podcast, and his community he's built with new evangelicals and is trying to continue to build. There are so many people that are in that space of, we still hold on to the value of Christianity or of just like religion in general. In fact, there's actually lots of scientific benefits to religion and to religious practice. And they see that and they see value in these teachings of Jesus, but they also want reform. And we've seen the Christian church go through reform multiple times. Like the one that I feel like everyone knows is Martin Luther's 99 thesis nailed to the door of the Catholic Church, but that also happened when the Catholic and the Orthodox Church split. And we've seen Christianity evolve over time. I don't know if we'll see it fully realized in a reformation in our lifetime, or if we're at the cusp of it, if it's just starting, or what that looks like. But I'm fairly hopeful in that realm. I'm part of a Christian group that is like in that realm, and it gives me a lot of hope. It's interesting too, because there is just like a general like lack of value for religion and spirituality that has grown over the last several maybe decades even.
For valid reasons.
Yeah, there's lots of great reasons. But I mean, if you want to do a deep dive on this, then you should go on a deep dive on Rainn Wilson from The Office. I'm obsessed with him at this moment. But he has a lot that he talks about, the need for like a spiritual revolution he's fascinating.
He's pretty dope.
He is. He actually has a book that came out recently. I haven't read the book, but I've listened to several interviews with him now about the book, and it's called Soul Boom, and basically talking about the need for religion and spirituality and how it like helps us form a more just society. But he also recognizes like there's so much trauma and so many bad things in religion. He's Baha'i, and like talks about his Baha'i faith, but he also isn't saying everyone needs to be Baha'i. Like he's very encouraging of religion and spirituality, but not of a specific one. And so it's just fascinating hearing about like how religion allows us to structure our lives, how religion impacts our health, how religion impacts the way that we view justice and the way that we organize ourselves. I think that there's a lot of potential. And I think that religion has been used as a tool in humanity for millennia to structure ourselves and to give ourselves purpose. And I think that's valuable still. But how that looks in the future for Christianity, I don't know. We'll see.
It's a tough one. I think in hindsight, at some other point, whether we're here for it or not, people will look back and see that something was happening. But,
I kind of hope that this period of time is impactful in the long term when it comes to Christianity, and that this isn't just like a blip in Christianity's history.
So hopeful for that.
We'll see. Yeah. Anyways.
But my next question for you is actually, how have you, throughout the process of writing the book, until now, seen your faith evolve personally? I mean, it's from being a LGBTQ supporting member of the church, but then walking through all of this drama and walking through this new friendship and writing this book and becoming like a true, fully fledged, no one could say you're not an ally. Like, how has your relationship to faith changed?
It's still evolving. I am one of the people that, I don't go to church because it's just it's somewhat traumatizing. But even more than that, if I'm being really honest, I found that Sunday mornings and Sundays as a whole are really, really fun if you don't have to go to church.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Girl, game changer.
Sunday brunch is on the table now. And
oh yeah. My house is so much cleaner now.
Donut runs.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of life there that, I missed out on. So I'm not in the rush to go back to church just because I'm exploring what it looks like to have a full weekend that I've never had before. And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also not, because it's true.
It's real, yeah.
It's real. I haven't given up. Like, some people go the atheist route, and that's not me. I'm not an atheist, and I'm not even, I'm not anti-Christianity. I'm anti-evangelical Christianity. I've seen just way too much damage that's been done. But I'm curious now. I think that the biggest thing is that I don't shut anything down. I don't say, like, in evangelical spaces, you always, you hear about something, you get 2 or 3 words into it and you're like, okay, bad, good. Let's put it in the bad box or the good box. Or there's just like this pressure to instantly judge things. And now I just approach anything and everything with this open curiosity. And not that I can be deceived by any old thing that comes along. I mean, you just want to look at it. You want to give something a chance. And I think I was always wary of, oh my goodness, we can't read Buddhist literature, or we can't. Unitarian churches were always like very suspect because I don't know if they're always about Jesus. So, there was always this skepticism. But recently I got asked to speak at a Unitarian church. And I think that I felt more, fulfillment or more spiritual nourishment than I felt in a lot of times going to evangelical church. It was Palm Sunday, and I came to see the Palm Sunday story through a different set of eyes, different lenses, and I learned things. I learned about there's people that connect the concept of justice to Palm Sunday, and I'd never seen the story through this lens before. And I realized that here's a space that I was always told was bad space, and yet I can go into it. And I can get spiritually fed, and I can feel that I've had a conversation about Jesus, and I've had a conversation about his time on earth and his life and his death. And I've not only had that, I've seen it from a broader, wider perspective. And I learned things about the Christian Bible that I didn't know before. So, I think that is all under this umbrella of evolving faith and realizing that I had been given this maybe narrow sort of, this is what, you'll stay between these rails and you'll be all right. And there's a lot out here. Also binaries. I'm just obsessed with this concept of most of life happens between binaries. And I got this from knowing about intersex and knowing that when people, we always want to put people in the, male, female category. Intersex is neither. And binary thinking affects all of life. It's not just about gender. It's about so many things. It's about anytime we say that's good, that's bad, or this is this way and that is that way. And we're discounting all of this in between, everything that is in between those two binaries. So I've been trying to challenge myself to not have binary thinking about anything. And that has also been challenging to my faith. So and these are not ways I would have thought even 5 years ago, and certainly not 8 or 10 years ago.
Non-binary thinking is, I think it's difficult because we live in a society that has conditioned us to take everything as very black and white.
Yes.
And so diving into that gray area can be hard to not want to default into one direction or another. And so it really is, it's like a practice and an exercise of thinking out of dualism and out of this very strict way of thinking and this very absolutist mentality. And so I feel like that's like a lifelong work for anyone who wants to open their mind to explore that further. It's a constant reminder because everything else around us is telling us things are black and white.
And I think that it's far reaching. It's not even just about concepts. It's about, like before we started recording, I shared that I had some bad news at work, and and at least for the next year, I'm not going to be in a classroom, and I'm going to be just focusing on my writing and my reporting. And, we weren't expecting things to go this way. And for me, when this news first hit, my first thought was, this is like the worst thing that's ever happened. And then I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, stop. Binary thinking. And I think I'm trying to bring it into all parts of my existence. Like, things aren't the best. They're not the worst. They're probably somewhere in between that. And that's where reality is. That's where life is. And it's freeing.
Yeah. It's that idea of like true acceptance is like at some level just neutrality. And it's very hard. My therapist talks to me about this all the time. And I'm like, this is great, but I don't think you understand how I was raised. And it's truly, I went down a rabbit hole about a year ago learning about the concept of a mind virus, which essentially is just a toxic way of thinking that has developed a pathway in your brain that your neurons continue to travel through.
Yep.
And it's like, this is a sickness. It's a form of being sick because your way of thinking is harming you. Mm-hmm. And you actually have to work really hard to correct and build new neural pathways.
Yep.
And so it's like deconstructing essentially the way you view the world to rebuild a new way of seeing the world that's more beneficial to you and those around you. But again, like you said, that is a life's work. It is
life's work.
That's an undertaking.
Yeah, the neural pathways it's fascinating to look at. My husband was telling me a couple of months ago that he can trace back, like his views, a lot of his views have changed over the years. And he said, I kind of trace it back to one day I decided that I was going to put my pants on differently. I'm going to switch the leg that goes in first. And I just started laughing. I said, no way, you are just kidding me. And he said, no, I read something about we always do things the same way. And we need to intentionally mix it up because that way we're kind of expanding our mind literally because this neural pathway is telling you, okay, right leg, then left leg, or this sock, and then that sock. And just the act of doing that opposite, doing it differently, mixing it up can actually rewire your brain. And because you learn subconsciously, oh, right leg first is right and this is wrong, or, putting the left sock on first, that's the right way to do it. If we do it the other way, that's the wrong way. And he said, like, it sounds silly, but that was the beginning of his, I guess, ability to see things as not static, right and wrong, and we do it this way. And he said from there it was just like he just took off.
Isn't it weird though that as you start those things, it feels wrong? Like because it's different, it's like, no, this feels physically so incorrect. And I think we meaning humanity, confuse that difference with like a gut feeling of like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like foreign equals incorrect.
Yeah.
Or something you're not used to equals wrong.
Yeah.
And that's just not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
Which we find out when we travel. We find that out when we physically travel.
Yeah.
And we see that other cultures do things different ways. Totally. And just because they do it different doesn't mean that our way's better. It's like ethnocentrism, that we develop. However we do it is right.
100%.
Totally. It's like, here we go, colonialism. Woo!
Yeah. Well, yeah, I had a friend the other day who called a different country's food weird. And I was like, what's weird about it?
Different.
It's like, well, it's not anything that we normally eat in an American diet. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. But like, those people probably love it, and they might think our food is weird. Like,
they're like pizza.
They didn't mean anything by it, but it's like this idea that this is weird and therefore like gross or bad because it's different food that other people eat
bad.
That you're not used to, and it's little simple things like that. I think they do build up to a bigger, broader symptom of like how we think and how we address things that are new or different or uncomfortable. And so I think it's valuable to take note of that, even as simple as how you put your pants on. I don't even know which leg I put on first.
I'm like,
I'd have to like really, I need to like
think
pay
I'm
attention.
Definitely a right legger. Right leg, left leg. Yeah.
I've been trying to think about it really hard. And I think I'm 82% sure that I actually switch between the two.
Ooh.
Which may have something to do. Well, I'm dyslexic, so everything is fucked up all the time. Like, so talking about everything that's different and all those things, I think begs the question for me is, how's your book been received in both religious spaces and in the intersex space?
Yeah,
it's a really fascinating question. I think a lot of straight up religious evangelical people have just ignored it. It doesn't exist if you ignore it. So I've had a lot of that, a lot of ignoring, and I've also had Intersex, it's the most fascinating, I think, part of the conversation is how has the intersex community responded? And that's what I'm most concerned about and interested in, really.
Right.
Yeah.
The very amazingly cool thing is that I know a disproportionately high number of intersex people now. So
Yeah.
I definitely have like friendships that have developed with intersex people. And I know a community now of intersex people. And that is exciting and wonderful to me to think that I've been able to make friends with people who are intersex because they positively received the book. The person who did my narration on the audiobook, Jennifer Wren Pickens, is intersex. And it was the best day ever when she auditioned to play me on the audiobook. And I found out she was intersex, and this is like the best possible outcome because I at first wanted to do my own narration because that's what I like as a reader when I listen to audiobooks, but there were a million reasons why that wasn't going to happen, and I hadn't even thinking about who's going to read the Dani section because that would have been weird if I read it. So my publisher put out an audition, and we found Jennifer was one of the first people that responded, and she got right on it. She said, well, this has all of the elements. It's intersex and it's spirituality. And I'm really interested in this project. So, from that perspective, that's been very positive, but, I think too, I always try to point out that when you know one intersex person, you know one intersex person. I said, a while back that there are lots of different types of intersex, and there are lots of different ways of being intersex. And there's not just, oh, this is the way the intersex people do it. It's not like that at all. So from that perspective, it shouldn't be surprising that there's been definitely one, maybe two intersex people that actually did have a problem with the book. There was somebody we reached out to for an endorsement, and she just didn't like the back of book copy. She didn't read the book. She didn't know anything about the book, but she thought that the description of what Dani went through was incorrect. And weirdly, had her doctor read it, and the doctor didn't think it sounded right. And he was an intersex researcher. And I'm thinking, there's so many jumps here. Like, I can't get medicine from my doctor, who's been my doctor for 25 years, without going in and having him see me. So I'm thinking, how in the world do we diagnose people for the back of a book? And how can, there was a lot of just very strange things that happened with that. So, we kind of just chalked it up to, okay, this isn't a good person that's, to ask to endorse the book, and, we won't be working, with that person. But it kind of was jarring and at first upsetting because I'm thinking, I'm trying to work with the intersex community, and now here's somebody who's not taking it in that way. So that was hard. I recently saw on Goodreads, it wasn't an intersex person, but it was a lesbian, actually kind of gave the book a meh review because she's like, I know this person, her heart's in the right place, but I just really can't swallow the fact of having to choose whether you're going to be an ally or not. And okay, I can take that. I understand that. Again, it's not going to be for everybody. There's always going to be somebody that sees something different.
Right.
And that's part of the drama and fun of putting out a book, is that everybody's going to have their own read on it. And you lose control of the work the second you release it out to the world. People are going to read it the way they're going to read it. So for the most part, it's been good. Ignored a few people who have grumbled. I think that's where we're at.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the trepidation is understandable in the sense of hearing the premise of the book of saying there's this this woman who's not intersex, this woman who's telling this intersex person's story. Like there's like I already said, it gave me pause when I first heard it. I was like, okay, like what are we talking about here? Like, well, let's investigate further. And it's definitely, like I mentioned it, that we were interviewing you to a friend who is lesbian. And she was like, oh, what? Tell me more. Like, I need more information about what exactly you mean. She's like, because I think there is that inherent hesitancy because there have been people who have historically like appropriated the stories of minorities or who have spoken for minorities and spoken over them instead of platforming them.
Right.
And so I think there's an understandable level of trepidation, but there's also a lot of nuance in the way that you're telling this story and a lot of nuance in knowing where you're coming from and the relational equity that you have with Dani and with other people within the intersex community now. And like the idea that you have to come to terms with like how to be an ally. It's hard because allyship is not necessarily what we were all raised to do, right? Like we were conditioned and told, many of us were conditioned and told that this is just bad and that you need to be against it.
So many mistakes.
There's a huge lack of education about what it means to be gay, what it means to be trans, intersex, etc. There's so much that people are learning on the fly and so much where people's hearts might be in the right place, but they don't know the right thing to say yet. And so, I mean, I think that one thing that's kind of cool about your book and story is that it's showing a lot of process and showing like a peek behind that door of like journeying through allyship while you're also seeing the process of like Dani's journey through coming out, coming into his own, and all of that comes with that. And so I think it is a valuable and an encouraging story to tell still.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and like I feel like the process you went through is actively choosing to not be in a cheap seat, right? Back to Brene Brown, Man in the Arena quote, right? You're actually getting skin in the game.
Yes.
And like, there's a cost associated with that. Like, like this isn't something you were handed. This is something you chose to support. And I think that's very different. But, you know, everyone can choose to see it how they do.
Of course. And I was very careful to tell some stories of when I got it wrong. If you haven't got to my part yet, you haven't gotten there yet. But I made terrible mistakes, back we didn't have a lot of information, like you're saying. I was one of those people that just, in theory, I wanted to be welcoming and supporting to all people. And it just kind of never sat well with me that there was a whole group of people that we were just supposed to ostracize. That never felt right to me, but that also didn't mean that I inherently knew how to serve them. It didn't mean that I knew how to be an ally. It just, I didn't like the idea of, we don't like this group of people over here.
I mean, the complexity of allyship, of what it looks like to write a book like this, of what it looks like to dive into these stories and to also put yourself on the line for someone that you care about, where you don't really get personal gain from it. That's huge. And so I appreciate you sharing about that and sharing about the need for that. I think that it is so important and so valuable. And the fact that you get to platform Dani's story is such a privilege.
It is a privilege. Definitely.
All that to say, we are nearing the end of our episode, and we have to ask you a question that we actually ask every guest.
Okay.
And it is our token question. Everyone's ready for it. I'm going to ask it.
Open to interpretation.
I know what's coming.
So this question is open to interpretation. There's no wrong answer, just as there's no right answer, because there's no binaries here.
No binaries at all.
Living in the gray.
It is, Cynthia, what does the phrase woman being mean to you?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this. And it's kind of funny within this context because it's such a gendered question.
It is.
And I think that, what the things that come to mind for me, I can't say that it wouldn't be that somebody who's a man or non-binary, maybe they would have a similar answer. So I don't know, if I have the market cornered on this, but I think about evolving, and I think about becoming, and I think about all the roles that I've had. And I think, I don't have any hard statistics on this, but it wouldn't surprise me to learn that women, at least historically, kind of have more roles than men do. Like even back when women weren't working outside the home as much and they would do things at home, but then when they were trying to go out into the workforce and then they're doing the brunt of the nurturing and the cleaning and all this, but also trying to have this career. So I think about all the different roles that women have and all the different things that we can be in our lives, but also how that changes and evolves. And there was one part at the end of Intersexion where I started talking about all of the different versions of myself that burnt to the ground. And I think that that's kind of how I got into the space of thinking about, well, I used to be this thing and I'm not anymore. And I used to be that thing and I'm not anymore. And this thing kind of burned. And now I have to reinvent myself and be something different. So I think that the phrase just, I hear being, and I also think of becoming. Like we can be one way one day, but we're becoming something different. And I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but that's what I think when I hear the phrase.
That's great.
I think that's amazing. And I think, one thing that we've, grappled with over our time on this podcast is, what do we mean when we say woman being? Because it does feel very...
just like you said, it's constantly evolving.
It is.
Right.
It is always evolving. And I think that there's this tension of the phrase woman feeling like you're limiting. But at the same time, like womanhood and woman and femininity is still valuable and is still, it's something that we value so much.
Right. Like we don't want to erase it. We want to set a larger table, but yet not erasing the fact that women's spaces are important spaces.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, at least in my mind, like that idea of woman being has expanded so much over the years and has been able to grow into something that really could apply to anyone, like regardless of gender, sexuality, or any of that. It is inclusive in my mind.
Well, you had a non-binary person on recently.
We did. Yeah. And so it's something, I think we've danced along this line of figuring out how to navigate a term that has been historically pretty binary. And sort of looking at the ways to still claim womanhood and femininity, but not be that in an exclusive way.
I love that.
Anyways, I love your answer. And to really start wrapping things up, Cynthia, I need to ask, do you have any resources to share with our listeners?
I do.
It could be anything. Books, podcasts, movies, etc.
Well, one thing I always like to do when I have the chance is I like to plug the work of my friend Megan DeFranza. And she is a theologian and also a therapist. And she actually worked in higher education too. But her book, A Sex Difference in Christian Theology, Sex Differences in Christian Theology. It is not a story. It's like a deep dive into all of the religious components that go into being intersex and all of the ways intersex people have been treated in Christianity. And also, she has a film which goes along with the book.
Amazing.
Yeah, you can go to her website, and it's just her name, megandefranza.com. Mm-hmm. And you can't watch the film there, but you can purchase a license, an individual license to watch it, or a license to watch it with a group. And what she does is go into the lives of several different intersex people, and their spiritual practices and the ways they've been treated in their spiritual spaces. There's some Jewish space that's looked at, and so it's not just Christianity, but it's a fascinating film. And the book is great. So it's almost like we have talked before about how my book is like this gateway with story. Like, we're wired for story, and we care about Dani. We want to see, what happens to Dani. But when you finish Intersexion and you have all these questions about, wow, how does this all work? Megan's book is a great resource because she goes into it from a completely different angle, but answers a lot of the questions. I don't attempt to answer questions. Megan does.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have Megan's website and everything linked
that'd be great.
Description.
That'd be great. I think it's a good companion work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how can the people find you, Cynthia?
Yes. And where can people buy your book? Tell them
and
everywhere.
buy your book.
Yes. You can come to my website, cynthiavaccadavis.com, for all different resources, but also Amazon has the book. Lake Drive Books, they're my publisher, and there's more information and links there. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. Not a lot of people do these days. Amazon is kind of king right now, but and you can ask for it wherever fine books are sold.
There you go. That's amazing. So I recommend checking out her book. I'm gonna finish it, but it's already great so far. Yeah. And be sure to, can they find you on like Instagram?
Oh, yes.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you hit up my website, there's like links to my
Instagram
socials,
and all of that.
So,
Totally.
Yep.
Give Cynthia a follow. And while you're on Instagram, give Woman Being Podcast a follow if you haven't already. And we're also on TikTok. We're on all the podcast platforms. We are not wherever books are sold, unfortunately. Not yet.
One day.
We'll see.
Mark my words. If I have anything to do about it.
Yeah. But thank you, listeners, so much for listening. Thank you, Cynthia, so much for sharing and being so open and sharing your story and giving us insight into Dani's story. It is such a privilege.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the conversation. It's been great.
Yeah. All that to say, we're just going to wrap this one up. Be sure to give us a podcast review on the podcast platforms. Give Cynthia's book a review.
Yes, please.
Because that also helps her.
Buy it for your mom. Buy it for your friend. Buy it for your cousin. Yeah.
So just go on a reviewing spree.
Yes.
Come back and then tell us how great we are and how much you love the podcast and how much you love the book. Yes. And it'll all be great. So
all around.
And all that to say, we're ending this episode. We'll catch you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Great.
Cynthia.